So if the manager is listening to us and saying like, oh my gosh, we have a disconnection in our company, we have
Mm-hmm.
to recognize that we want connection. So the senior leadership team and the middle management, they want connection because they depend on each other. So when the manager is listening and saying, well, what can I do? I get surprised and I don't like it. I don't like it. I
Mm-hmm.
don't want them to surprise me. We want that manager to recognize, well, how can I communicate that impact to the senior leadership team without pushing them away? Experience work interactions in a different and refreshing light. This is the Leader in You podcast, brought to you by EMC Leaders, taking care of the teams you care about.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Leader in You podcast. My name is Polina, and I'm here with the amazing Dr. Lola Gershfeld, who also happens to be my mother. If you're new to our podcast, we are the most educational, informative, and exciting podcast about organizational development, resolving conflicts through emotionally connected process, and creating a culture in your company that is thriving. We want you to thrive, and we are here to help support you through that process and to give you insights, tools, and most importantly, secret, magical
Formula, formula, the roadmap.
yes, to get the results you want for your company, or if you're working at a company and you want to be more connected, or you want to have a deeper connection, deep connection with your colleagues, your boss, your employees, this is the place to be. Yay!
Hey, hello everyone. Thank you, Polina. What a great introduction. I'm just getting excited just from listening to you.
Oh, yeah. Well, this is an exciting topic, and I think also it's so powerful. It's so helpful for people to learn how to use these tools because it is just not going to help them only in their work life, but also their personal life.
Exactly. Absolutely. Yes. So I'm excited to be here.
Yay. So, what are we talking about today?
Well, I thought organizational culture would be a great topic to talk about. Recently, I had a live training with some group of people, and this person came in and she said, I'm so exhausted.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so exhausted because our company is going through culture transformation again and reorganization. And it feels like we just done that 5 years ago and we're doing it again.
Well, this is such a great topic, and I think it's also very, very common. And we see this so much in even all the conversations we had at the conference. This is our first podcast back after we were at the conference, the ATD conference. And yeah, I think that that's a lot of what we heard. People are exhausted. They're exhausted from dealing with conflicts. They're exhausted from the toxic work environment. They're exhausted from, the turnover with employees. And they're also exhausted by the organizational culture.
Exactly. Specifically, what are the signs of the problems in the organization? What people have experienced? The biggest problem, I think, is communication. This is what I hear. Communication is not flowing from the senior leadership team to the middle management to the frontline employees. And there's a breakup in communication. So, for example, the frontline employees and the middle management and the supervisors don't feel like they're involved in what's going on with the company. And the senior leadership team don't feel they are appreciated and valued. So
Mm.
there's a big disconnection happening in the culture. So communication is number one.
So, what do you find are the some examples of where there's the communication that is the problem that's could be like one of the root causes of the disconnected culture?
For
What
example,
are some signs?
when the senior leadership team changes the direction of the company, the middle management or the frontline employees have no idea.
Mm.
Or if the senior leadership team is wanting to create a new product. They don't really talk to the frontline employees and get their input or talk to the middle management to let them know what's happening. Or they are changing the budget or they're changing the financial. So any changes that are happening in a company, the middle management and the frontline employees are always surprised.
Because you think that they're not actually communicating like we are changing the management in this in the company, or do you think they are communicating that, but they're not actually creating space for the other people involved or the employees to share their concerns or their fears, or where do you think the miscommunication is occurring? Because I do feel like for example, I had a friend who recently got a new position at this investment banking. And they introed him to the team via email with the guy's bio and that sort of thing. So how do you think the miscommunication is handled, or where does that take place if they do share that information, or what? What are you seeing? Where is the disconnection
Well,
occurring?
I think the disconnection occurs is probably the senior leadership has an idea of some change, whether it is a change management or in getting somebody new. Your friend's company case, it could be that the people were open and preparing the company for this new person so they could send an email. But often, sometimes the employees don't know that the change is coming. And
Mm.
suddenly the person who was at the top in some leadership position, suddenly they're no longer there.
So what do you, so okay, this actually brought up in my mind a thought. I had the conversation with someone at the conference that said, it's common like when someone's going to get fired or people are going to get fired, there's a lot of talk that happens prior to that occurring, right? Like everyone starts to be like, "Oh my God, did you hear they're going to be doing a bunch of layoffs?" And like, "Oh, I feel like, I'm scared to lose my job," or "Do you think they're going to cut here?" Those kinds of conversations happen. And so if they're bringing new people into the company and they're not informing the company of the new people, or maybe they are informing them, but they're still missing the way that they should be communicating, what would be some things that you would recommend and suggest based on your process and all of the incredible books that you've written? How do you communicate? What does good communication look like in a company like that that's dealing with bringing on new employees or new management?
And that's a great question. And before we dive into it, we have to recognize what is happening in a company in terms of, yes, we could have a solution, but let's look at the core issue, what is happening and preventing them to communicate openly. I think the surprise is the biggest problem that people have. Whether it is changing the direction or changing management, or suddenly there's a budget cuts, or suddenly there's a new person is coming in. Whenever people are not sharing the plan or the information to the company or to the whole entire company, the surprise comes in. I think the very first thing is that have you been surprised in the company? And how do we eliminate the surprise? Because surprise could be interpreted and perceived two different ways. Could be, oh, wow, that is great, right? There's something new happening. Well, I didn't know that. And another way is like, oh my God, look what happened, and we have not been told.
So let's take it back to what we originally started talking about, which was the organizational culture. When you take a situation, like one of the things that they can do in communication, because that's the very first step in creating this emotionally safe environment and shifting the culture of an environment and organization that possibly is not so safe, would be to create situations or create communication so people are not surprised.
Yes.
So, like, if you were to go, so let's say we are dealing with, I don't know, HP, for example. Okay. And they are having an issue in their company, and they are going to bring in a whole new management, but they don't understand. We've got this one employee that you're talking about that is very tired of changing the whole culture, and it's been 5 years, and now a reorganization because people are stuck and they don't know what to do. And so they're like, Dr. Lola, we need you and they call you in, what would be the first step that you would take that we can maybe give insight to people on the steps that you would take, and maybe they can add that and integrate that into what they're doing? Would you have a seat with everyone and say, all right, who feels surprised in the company? Or who feels, I know you would have them take the assessment probably first.
Yes.
But in regards to this specific situation, what kind of suggestions could we give
A
to people?
question. I think the very first thing is we need to understand the process of their communication. So, for example, the most complaint that I hear from people is that there's no communication. The senior leadership team is not communicating to us what they plan. So now we have to
Mm-hmm.
ask what blocks them to communicate. And one of the things that we find out is that the leadership team, if you think of Group A as a leadership team and
Mm-hmm.
Group B as a management and direct reports, you see this separation. There's like a gap, right? There's a
Mm-hmm.
distance that happens within those two groups. The senior leadership team are working together and trying to make all these decisions. And then the middle management and the frontline employees, they feel completely excluded. Not
Mm-hmm.
that they have to make decisions, but they get surprised. So they get completely excluded from the direction or from the information that is happening. So when the communication comes, they're like shocked. What are you talking about? One of the things we have to recognize is, wait a second, let's identify the pattern, the cycle that
Mm-hmm.
these two groups are stuck in. Yeah, the senior leadership teams maybe is not sharing information. There's a block for them to share, and they don't feel safe to share
Yeah.
information.
Mm-hmm.
And the middle management and the frontline employees, they don't feel safe because they feel excluded and rejected in that moment. So
Mm-hmm.
now we have to recognize, well, let's go back, let's slow it down, let's take a few steps back and recognize what happened. How did they get into this pattern of shutting down and being rejected? And then we find out that often the frontline employees and the middle management complain and
Mm-hmm.
criticize the senior leadership team for whatever they're doing, and the senior
Mm-hmm.
leadership team start to feel they're not valued, they're not good enough, that somehow we're disappointing them, and they don't want to share the information because they can't deal with complaints and criticism.
It's so interesting because, I think that the more people that I've heard from with the conflicts that go on in an organization or a company, it's just so common. All of these cycles are so common.
Yes.
And I feel like there's not that many, not that many cycles, right? I mean, you could do like the four withdraw, pursuer, 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 withdraw, withdraw, I guess three cycles that take place, but they're not that many. Once you start learning these patterns, and sometimes we hear like from employees that are like, "Oh no, my boss did this and that," which is like different than da da da, but it's like it turns out to be those same patterns and cycles. So I think what I want to get at though is what if someone is in the situation? What can they do? So let's take it from a manager's perspective. We have a manager listening to the podcast, to our watching our video on YouTube. What can they do to start by creating this safe environment? Yes, of course, it'd be great to have you in there and train their entire company and organization on how to communicate their feelings and fears and needs. But at this moment where they may be feeling stuck or they feel like unsafe in this environment, what can they do?
The first thing they can do is to recognize that they are in a negative cycle, that there's a disconnection happening. When
So,
there's a miscommunication, when people get surprised and people go into these behaviors of
mhm.
complaining, criticizing, or shutting down and avoiding, there's a disconnection happening. There's a negative cycle. That's the first step.
Yeah, so awareness of the situation, of the cycle occurring, that's the very first step. And when it comes to communication, Let's say we take the topic of being surprised. What are some things that they could do to create an environment that's safe in this topic of communication?
The second thing I guess they can do is recognize how does it impact them, that surprise. So the senior leadership team and the middle management, they want connection because they depend on each other. So when the manager is listening and saying, well, what can I do? I get surprised and I don't like it. I don't like it. I
Mhm.
don't want them to surprise me. We want that manager to recognize, well, how can I communicate that impact to the senior leadership team without pushing them away?
Hmm.
Instead, I want to pull them closer to me so they can understand how difficult it is for me when they get surprised.
So it could be well received. I think this is the shift that occurs when you comparing like a negative cycle to a positive cycle, where when you do learn the way to communicate, because people say like, well, you're supposed to communicate and this is how it's supposed to, you're supposed to tell me how it feels. And oftentimes they don't necessarily know how to say it and express those in that in a way that makes the other person able to receive the information and feel safe with it.
One of the things that we talk about is to reframe, right? Reframe in attachment terms with saying, like, oh my gosh, we're in a negative cycle. Nobody's a bad guy. There's no bad guy. So the leadership team, not that they wanted to exclude us, but they don't feel safe to share it because they don't want criticism, they don't want complaints. So they don't share, they avoid. But they want to be connected to us and they care about us, and the same thing for us. When we get surprised, we feel so rejected and abandoned. We don't want to push them away, but we also want to share the impact it has on us. So the first thing
Mhm.
is we don't want to complain and we don't want to criticize. We don't want to judge people that they have this surprise for us. We want to understand that the reason why people gave us surprise and didn't want to tell us is because they didn't feel safe.
So we're going to let's give our listeners two scenarios, okay? So we're talking about if you are in the middle management role in this situation and you get surprised with information for whatever reason you hear that there's going to be some new management coming in, but nobody's informed you, and now there's a shift in the company. Actually, I that just reminded me of a situation where we knew someone who was buying a company and then they bought the company, but the owner of the company didn't inform they had like a contract with one of their clients overseas and didn't inform the client that they have a new owner for the company. And the client was very upset because he
Yeah,
was like, I'm
exactly.
so
Right.
surprised. Like, why was there no communication
Right.
about this new ownership? Like, what's going to happen with my relationship with the company? So yeah. So I think the very first thing, just to recap, and also to clarify an action item, which I think is very important for you guys to take away from this, is number one, Dr. Lola is saying, become aware that the situation that you could be experiencing with uh, senior management is a negative cycle.
Yes.
Number two is to make sure we clearly identify that it's nobody's fault and we want to communicate in a way that is well received from the other side. So using the emotional language, and we're going to give you some sentences that you can use on number three. Using the emotional language, you can express your difficulty in the surprise to your senior management. And
Yeah.
number three would be how to communicate that. So let's give them some examples.
The first thing is we want to say thank you for sharing, right?
Well,
You got
they didn't have any information.
right. They didn't have it, and now they got surprised.
Yeah, so they got surprised,
We want to
but
slow it
they did
down.
not hear it from the senior management at all. Yeah, so who are they saying thank you for the information?
From whoever they got the
They got
information.
the information. Okay,
Okay,
so
say
instead
thank
of
you for sharing, right? Thank you for sharing. Wow, that's surprise. That is and now identifying what's happening from. Wow, that is very big surprise to me.
Yes.
Okay.
Compared to instead of, oh my God, what? They're doing that again? Oh, I can't believe it. Gosh, this company, I feel so fill in the blank judgment, criticism, shame, blame.
Exactly, exactly. So, in order for us to even recognize, right? Thank you for sharing. Wow, that is a surprise. We have to be in balanced to do that.
Imbalance. Yeah, we
Yeah,
have
in
to
an
be in
emotional
balance.
balance. So, if we, in order before we even respond, we have to slow it down, and we
So
have
I think yeah. So the first step, awareness, and I understand that it's nobody's fault. Okay. So I think these are things over time as you get comfortable with, like, for example, if you have the Connected Culture book, there's a lot of this information here. And if you don't have it, please go to emcleaders.com to get it. But you're going to remember these things. So you have a pen and paper, write this down. Okay. Number one is to recognize that this is a negative cycle and it is
yes,
no one's fault.
yes,
Okay. I know that is so strange in the society that we live in. It is so bizarre because everyone's always like, I didn't take accountability. It's your fault, and pointing fingers and who did what. And they're the bad guy. I'm not the bad guy. Right? That's the society we live in. So it's the shift of it's nobody's fault. We're in a negative cycle. Number two is, or maybe because the recognition, I think, is the awareness of what's happening with you comes sometimes after a reaction.
yes,
Like we have a
exactly.
reaction, we're like, whoa, like I didn't realize how much it threw me off,
Yes,
you
exactly.
know?
Yes.
So I think that awareness is also important. And then communicating what's going on with you at that moment. So instead of, you can have a reaction, and as you get comfortable with using this type of language and this type of process, it will be easier. You will have an easier time regulating, self-regulating, and being able to express yourself in a more receiving way. So we're going to say, instead of, oh my God, I can't believe it, judgment, criticism, shame, blame, we're going to say, thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah, wow, that is a
Very
surprise.
surprising.
Yeah, I'm surprised. That is shocking. Or instead of shutting down and walking away, that's another
Hmm.
response that we could have because you get so hurt. You get
Yeah.
completely off balance, and
Yeah.
so you could say, instead of walking away, you can say, "Wow, that was a surprise. I don't know what to say, but I'm right here, right? I'm not walking away from the conversation."
Yeah.
We want to be able to recognize what we do in the moment when we get off balance, and we can recognize, and then we we become curious, right? Because we want to become curious, we want to recognize what is happening for us and what is happening for the other person, that they are not able to share that information for us because they don't feel safe, and neither do we.
I just want to add there too. I think when you shift into thank you for sharing and taking that pause, the pause to slow things down, and maybe sharing in that moment that's really surprising. And then, like, for example, communicating in an email or requesting a meeting with a senior management member, that how you felt. And we can go over that next with what are the things that you could say and how you could share your feelings. That is very helpful to then feel like to also receive and be able to have that empathy for the other people. I
Yes.
think as soon as we're able to say, that was really surprising, like, wow, that was really surprising. Yeah, thank you for sharing. And then to be able to go back and share, like, hey, I heard the news and I was really surprised. And this was really difficult for me to take in. And I'm feeling not very important in this moment.
Because you're very important to me, right? We also want
Yes.
to reframe it. So we're reframing it in an attachment term, saying that you are very important to me and I care about this company. I care about my role in this company. And when I get surprised, it throws me off balance. I start to feel not important.
Yeah. So
I
those are
know you
all.
did. You didn't do
Okay,
anything wrong because we
let's
want to reassure the other person. Nobody's a bad guy, right? You didn't do anything wrong. There's a
hold
reason
on.
why you
People
didn't.
are writing down notes. People are writing down notes. They don't know how to respond like this. We're teaching them right here. We're teaching them right here. So you said all of those important things. We want to give them reassurance. We
Yeah.
want to validate our experience and also their experience. We want to also have the ability to say, yeah, it's not your fault. We're not pointing any fingers. It's just very difficult for me to
Yeah,
experience
I
not
it's
receiving.
I want you to know how it impacts me.
You know what? I have good news though. You guys, even if you don't get all these lines perfect on your paper, you don't have to because we have it all written down for you.
One of the things we wrote in the Connected Culture book, being emotionally responsive. And it
Yes,
says emotional validation. It makes sense why you would not communicate to me because you don't feel safe. And it makes sense why I get off balance because I start to feel unimportant, right?
right.
Just even and accepting vulnerability. So
Hmm.
even slowing things down. The reason why we want to share this is because we want to create a connection.
Hmm.
People get into negative cycles because they are trying to get connection, but they're using ineffective strategies. So what
Yeah,
we want to shift the cycle. We want to shift the way they dance together by recognizing what is happening for them emotionally and by reaching to the other person in a safe and professional way so they can respond in a safe and professional way. Again, when we say there's no bad guy, we're setting a stage for safety. We're saying, I'm not blaming you, I'm not complaining, I'm not criticizing. I'm sharing the impact because you are important to me and I know I am important to you.
and if you're listening and you are confused, that's okay. It is can be very difficult to grasp this entire concept because we do not live in a society yet that uses this kind of language. We don't reach for this as frequently as we should or as automatic as we should right now. But I just want to give an example. So, for those of you who are watching YouTube, you'll be able to see this. If you're just listening to our podcast, you might not see it. But if you do have the Connected Culture book on page 40, it gives an example creating emotional safety. What is less safe and what is more safe? And these are all the different things that we actually train you in our training. If you're like, oh, I want to be proficient in creating safety in my company, I want to 10x my business, I want to create a culture that I don't have to constantly change, reorganize, restructure, again, put my employees through that again. This is the training program that you are going to want. So if you do have this book, this is really good. You can reference these pages that show the ways that people typically, and we're certain that you have done this before as well, because we have too, typically say things in the ways that you can turn it around and say things that create that emotionally safe attachment and also secure relationship in the business.
So what we want is we want both sides to express the impact. So we
Yeah.
want the middle manager to go into the senior leadership team and say, this is how it impacts me and my team. When we get surprised, we start to feel unimportant and we want to know that we are important. The same thing for
Yeah.
the senior leadership team. They want to recognize what blocking them to share the information. Do they feel judged? Do they feel criticized? Do they feel worried that somehow or something is
Hmm.
blocking them to share that information? So they need to be able to say, like, look, we're not sharing because this is how it impacts us. When you complain and criticize, we start to feel like not valued and not important to you. So we want to know that how
Yeah.
difficult it is for us when you criticize and complain.
Right. And I think that starting, like, let's say you're a listener here and you just right now want to make one small step that's going to create a closer connected experience for you in the workplace. The first thing is to make the shifts in the way that you communicate and use the process and use the things that you're learning in the books and from here in our podcasts. And even if you have that deep desire to really want to get proficient in this language, to do the training, you start first because that is where the impact's going to make the difference. And that people are going to notice, they're going to feel much more comfortable around you, they're going to feel safe around you. And the information that you're sharing is going to be so well received, there'll be the shifts in the conflicts and the situations that will be different than before.
Polina, as you were saying, of course it's difficult for one person to start, but we have to
Yeah,
start somewhere. And
right.
the most important thing is that we long for connection. And John Bowlby, who's the father of attachment theory, basically said that we are wired for connection. It is part of our survival code. Okay, I'm going to
Mm.
say that again. It is part of our survival code. And when we don't have connection, when we lose that connection, that is what causes us to criticize, complain, blame, or shut down because we don't know how to repair that connection. And Burton Lamphy, the father of system theory, says is that if you want to change a living system like a relationship, you have to look for the key elements that change the system. And science and psychologists have said that the very first thing that changes the system in a living system like a relationship is emotion.
Mm.
So we have to
So
change
what are you
emotion.
waiting for?
We have to change emotion with emotion. And
Yes.
that's what the whole process is learning about. How do we work with emotions? How do we recognize emotions? How do we share emotions in a safe and professional way so we can create that connection? And that's what we want. We want to create safety for people so they can repair the connection. Because that's what the negative cycles are all about. People are struggling with disconnection.
So there you go, you guys. That was just a few things that you can do, that you can actually, tangible things that you can hold on to and shift in the way that you experience your conversations. And we focused on communication because, yes, communication is key, but the way the communication is delivered is what is the most important. How you feel and the tools that you need to create this thriving environment for you. We are like in our body. I like to teach this too on when I do my live stream. It's like your body is like in its own world. And in order for your body to be healthy, we have to create an environment for your cells in your body to thrive. So if we take a look at an organization, kind of like a body system, and every single person is like a cell, we want the environment to be thriving for every cell person to fulfill its instructions, to fulfill its duties in that organization. So when we have that right environment, then those duties will be fulfilled. It just makes sense. It's kind of really simple, but we're just such complex humans. We need to try and make it much more complicated it is. The process is very simple. It's all written out in Dr. Lola's books. You can get the connected culture. You can do Evolve, which is the most recent book that you wrote, which we talked about over the conference and before we went to the conference. But thank you guys so much for listening.
We
Thank
have
you.
so much more to talk about, but definitely organizations can stop doing all the symptom problems and
Yeah.
get to the core issue of culture transformation, which is emotional connection.
We should do we can like diagnose, like in the medical field, they diagnose you and then
Yes.
they give you medications, but you have like all these negative side effects. So we can do like the diagnosis and then the medications of all the things people do that don't are not working for the company. And the side effects are unhappy employees, employees that leave, employees that no longer want to work for you, and possibly causing death.
And
But
lots of toxicity, exactly, in the culture. Yeah, it's very painful to work in a company where you feel stuck, you feel like you're not connected, you feel isolated. It's very, very, very
Yes,
difficult. And
it
people
is.
start to feel helpless and hopeless, and they can't sleep at night, and they can't eat it very well. They don't exercise. They become very depressed and
Yeah,
anxious. I'm happy that we are talking about it because I think this month is Emotion Awareness Month.
it
So
is
we need to talk about it.
perfect. I needed a good,
Or was it a Monday that was Emotion Awareness Day? But I know that it was some emotion awareness.
I'm gonna look it up because I feel like we need to do a whole podcast of emotional awareness.
Oh, and the last thing I want to say, I recently saw a post by Adam Grant, and he talks about that don't think organization is your family. Look at it as a professional community where you
Mm.
have to do your job and you have to be accountable and responsible. And I completely disagree. Because of we depend on each other, our brain interprets the people in the company as the family.
Well,
So
d didn't don't you, haven't you heard where you hear about like those motivational speakers that say you spend like 40 years of your life at work. That's 40 it's more than 40% based on the average age of people lifespan, but it's 50% if you're living to 80 of
mhm.
your life at work. You spend more time at work around the people at your job than you do doing anything else.
If you
So,
think about how the brain is attuned to people that we work with, they're like family. It's like telling people don't bring your emotions to the workplace. It
mhm.
felt to me the same way. And
Yeah.
I felt like, oh my gosh, this is incorrect to think about your company.
Well, that's what we're doing here. We are shifting the perspective. We are the first and foremost, you're the first and founder of this type of process to integrate it into an organizational system like this. And it's profound and it's very exciting to see the results, the rewards of the company culture shifting into this thriving environment and what it's doing for companies. So,
Yeah.
I'm so excited to be here. This is so great. And yeah, thank you very much for everyone who's watched this, who's listening. We appreciate you. We value your support. Please connect with us on Instagram, LinkedIn. We're actually also on TikTok and YouTube. You can comment down below, let us know your thoughts, or if you have any issues in your company that you would like to help you with. And thank you for, Mom, thank you as
Thank
always.
you, Polina.
A
Thank you
joy.
so much, everyone.
Yes, bye.
Bye. Thank you, everyone, for listening. It's a joy to share these podcasts with you. Be sure to check out our previous podcasts and subscribe to join us at our next podcast of The Leader in You, brought to you by EMC Leaders, taking care of the teams you care about. Until then, be well and be focused on your relationships. We'll see you soon.